So that is super helpful for this session for sure. So welcome everyone. My name is Tana Simon-Selly. I am the Instructional Tech Specialist at St. Charles North, and I have a co-host today.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Cannon, and I am the LRC Director over at Redland Middle School.
Excellent. Thanks, Megan. So Megan will be answering in the chat if I'm unable to, or if we're going to cover it, she'll let you know that we'll be covering it, shortly. But let's go ahead and dig right into these awesome Google Meet engagement tools. So we did create a presentation. So we will be sharing this out hopefully by the end of the week, if not sooner. But we're going to go ahead and go right into the engagement features. So Google Meet is upping the ante a little bit here. They have now incorporated a couple more engagement features very similar to our Zoom tools. The first one is, I think you all know, the chat, but some of the things that you might not have used yet with your students are the question and answer, the polls, the recent raise hand feature that's been added, and closed captioning for those individuals that might need that accommodation. So let's take a look at what these all involve and then what we can do instructionally with each one of those tools. So we're going to start off with the chat. I think the chat is one of those very basic tools that most kids have the ability to utilize. I know it's a little bit different for any littles. So if you want to type in the chat, if you could, what grade levels that you teach, that would be very helpful for us moving forward so we can kind of gauge any of the highlights your way. So it provides those students with a non-verbal way for them to communicate with the class or with you as the instructor. One of the things we want you to keep in mind is that establishing norms is one of the most important things here. I think with all of these tools, but the chat in general, because it is a display for all to see. And so that could be a little tricky with some of our students at different grade levels. I think for some of our students that are just learning how to type, we can encourage them to be independent with that, but we really want to establish the norms of what do we use the chat for and what should we type in there. Okay, so as you are the host, when you start your meeting, you will see that it is disabled for everyone to send messages if you turn off these little toggles. So all the toggles within Google Meet are green. So if it's grayed out, it means that it is off. If it's green, it means that it's turned on. So right over here, you can see that it's identified in a little image for you. And I want you to know for moving forward, when I go over the tool, these are like little cards to help you remember what are those quick need to knows when you're using this item. So whenever you start using a new tool, it's helpful to have these little cards right next to you to remind you what you need to turn on and off. Okay, so then you will be able to see what's going on in the chat that will be pulled up, and you can see that right here up at the top of your screen here in the Meet that you're in. You will see it up at the top, and it looks like a little text message window. You will click on that. If someone does type something in the chat, you will get a notification with a little green dot to acknowledge that someone has sent a chat over to you. So how can we use this for kids with instruction? There's some really fun ways to do that. We have the ultimate waterfall chat. This is one of my favorites to use with the students that I engage with. So one thing that you do, I highly recommend having a visual on a slide with the question that you're asking the students and have a stop sign so they know they need to stop before they send a message, because we've tried it before and they get all trigger happy and they want to go ahead and go in there and start typing away and sending it. But what I usually do is give them that 3, 2, 1 before they send it, and then it looks like a waterfall coming down in the chat window. So that's a lot of fun for students that don't always get to answer first, or sometimes they are always the ones that answer first. So it gives everybody an even playing field when they need to answer something. The work smarter, not harder mentality. So I'm not sure what LMS you are currently using with your students, but one of the things that we really appreciate from multiple with Google Classroom and with Schoology is that you can grab a link that is specific to an assignment or specific to a page. And why is that so important? Well, we think about instruction time. We think about how much time saver tips can really help with the flow of your class. So if I want a student to go on to their Google Doc that I have shared in Classroom with them, I can go and get that link from the assignment in Classroom, and I can post it right in the chat, and the kids are sent right over to it to hop on to their copy or to the collaborative doc that you have. So that's just something that will be huge as far as your transitions from one thing to the next. And then also, we really want to encourage our kids to be independent. And so if they can use the chat to advocate for themselves, to ask questions, or to even help classmates, you could have one of those student leaders be the moderator of the chat. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, the Q&A is another great spot for those students to gain that independence. So really encourage that. But that really starts from creating norms and establishing those norms with students. All right, for Q&A. This is a new feature. It is not something that teachers have been using all that much quite yet, but I think we just need to have some brainstorm of like, what could it be best used for? So again, up in the top right-hand corner, you will see that there is a little shapes tool up in the top. That is called the activities button. So from here on out, if you hear us say activities button, that is what we are going to be using for that terminology. So as I am sitting here, and I have not yet put in a poll, I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'm clicking number 1 on that activities, and then I'm going to turn on that Q&A. So now, after I turn it on, you should be able to, here in the Meet, you should be able to go ahead, and you saw that the Ask a Question has been started. So now if you needed to ask a question, potentially we could use that instead of the chat. And I hear Megan typing away. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so a couple of things. As you start to populate questions, I'm going to type one too. Okay, now keep in mind the Q&A, as we can see in number 3 here, the questions are displayed. However, the answers are going to be stated out loud. So we don't have a specific text box to type back the answers to students. This is more for engaging in that, okay, I don't want to forget this item, or I want to curate some things. Okay, so the way that you can filter this or have your students engage with it is by using some of those filters. So if you've answered it in class, you can go ahead over here, as you can see with my mouse. If you click on that checkbox, it turns it green, and you can go and see. So I'm going to go ahead and how can we use this in our classroom? Megan, we're going to get to that. And so I'm going to check that option. And so she can see that I've answered her. If other kids also want to agree with Megan, like, how can we use this in our classroom? How can we use it instead of them all typing it in like they would in the chat? Maybe they can just use the thumbs up, and they can make it a popular question for the entire class. Okay, it's like saying ditto, but using the thumbs up. Okay, all right. And then the nice thing about that is over here on the other side for the filter, you can set it to popular. So then you can see which are the most popular, and you can have those filtered out. It'll put it in that order. Okay, and last but not least, let's consider this. At the end of the meeting, the Sheets report is auto-emailed to your email, which is really super helpful for collecting data, for remembering what those frequently asked questions were, for clarifying any directions that students needed to have clarified. I think it's a great item for follow-up. I do want to make sure that we all know that you do see who has submitted the question, but you do not see who votes for the question. So that's where you might want to, if there was a lot of upvotes, you might want to touch base again, maybe in the chat or maybe with a Google form, to make sure that you know exactly who those students were, to hone in on that specific population. And it's nice because it has those check boxes that come out at you to know if you did anything to the actual question as the moderator. Okay, all right. Let's talk about how we can actually use this in class now. So just some very basic items are ask the teacher a question, right? It's a Q&A, very basic. Okay. When we move forward into voting, Okay, so kids could put their favorite ice cream in the Q&A, and they could vote on who has the best ice cream flavor of the month. Okay, we could also do a brainstorming session. So if you want to keep it for later, where yes, the chat will download, but this might be a better way for you to have it download from the Q&A, so you have the sheet with all of those items that you used within the Meet. As we encourage our students to be more independent, we want to look to see if they need clarification of any kind of materials that you sent out or directions for moving forward. So that's another way that we could utilize the Q&A. You could crowdsource, so kids could put their different resources. They could also add links. So they could put in their Google Docs, or they could put in an image from their Drive, what have you, and they could be voting that way. And then you can see who's the most popular for those specific items with the upvotes. And then also goals for independent work time. So if they're going to go in there, they could type in their ideas for what they would like to go off and work on. And then you have documentation of what they wanted to set for that goal. I think that's a really stellar option for moving forward for them. And then last but not least, for instruction, we could look at the student voice and the leadership, right? So we've got our kids that are just chomping at the bit to be helpful, or they really want to establish the independence for themselves along with having some voice. So we could look to see if they have a student presenter that day. So instead of interrupting the presenter, they could go ahead and use the Q&A to ask them questions throughout. And then you could have a moderator be the one that goes and asks that presenter to answer those questions for moving forward. I do like the idea of students deciding on what breakout room ideas they have for moving forward. Maybe it's who they would like to work with. Maybe it is setting up breakout rooms that might be quiet time or total collaboration, or they want to work on a Jamboard together and this group wants to work on slides. You can really mix it up and the students can voice what they think the breakout room should be broken up into instead of you always having to make those decisions. We already talked about the upvoting. So we can upvote those tasks with a popular filter. And then, as I said before, the student moderator could be a really great opportunity for some of those kids that don't always get involved a lot in class, to give them something to do. And it could also be the child that needs an on-task behavior to help them keep the focus on what they should be keeping the focus on. So just keep a couple of those in mind. Don't try all of them in one day. Okay, so I would definitely, when you establish the norm for the day and what you were going to use that Q&A for, it's great to have a complimentary slide so all the kids know what the Q&A will be used for, because there's a lot of options here. And if you change it up all the time, they might be a little confused. So just having that clarity for the students for moving forward, I think will be really helpful.
So Tanis, quick question. Can you, as the host, disable the upvoting? Like if you didn't want that to be visible for some reason or not, is that an option, or is that upvote always there for them to do?
I've seen that it's always there. Now what you
Okay.
can do though is you can just hide that question. So if
Okay.
you didn't want to work on the popular vote, you can always hide those things, and that will be only available for the host to see. That's a great question.
Okay.
Yep. And you can always turn it off, and then when you turn it back on, you would see it again.
Okay. So you can hide them for a time being and then put them back on for later if you want.
So I'm going to turn it off right now. Okay. So I can see the existing questions, but the students cannot ask more questions, and I could go in and I could hide them. So if you looked at it right now, you would notice that I turned off questions and I've hid both of those questions that you and I had.
And I'm noticing, since I submitted one of the questions, I can still see it, but it does let me know that the question has been hidden. So that's kind of helpful for the student to know that that is not in view of other students right now.
Yes, and that does bring up a good point. I'm going to hop back a slide here just 1 second. So over here with this question hidden, okay, it appears right? So like, even if you think that it's going to be hidden for a split second, every kid would see it. So until you hide it, it will always be visible to other students. So we're going to really make sure that our students, when we establish those norms, that these are not private questions that you're asking the teacher. That should be set aside for maybe a private comment on your Google Classroom, or sending a GChat or an email. Really make sure that they are not sending those private questions, because somebody could see it at some point or another.
So just to clarify, there is no way to hide it on the on the onset. You have to let them be visible before it can be
Correct.
hidden. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And that would be a great thing for us to recommend Google do, is to have that as an option for moving forward, for sure. Okay. Next up, polls. So again, we go to our activities button. We're going to click on those shapes up in the top. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with y'all. And in the polls, once you start a poll, okay, it's going to give you this view. Okay, and so because you are here today, you probably love them, but I'm just going to ask that anyway. So give me 1 second. The one thing that I do appreciate about the Google polls is that I am able to add emojis. So as you see there over on the far right, I love that I can enhance with a little bit of color and with a little bit of pizzazz and visual representation of the text that we want the students to answer. And I think that is so what our students are into right now. So just consider that as a nice feature. Megan, what would you say is your favorite extension for adding emojis? Do you have a favorite?
I do. I use, what is this one called? It looks like a little heart on my, it's called Emoji Keyboard, Emojis for Chrome. I had one that I loved, but I found that it look like you could use it, but when you copied and pasted it, you would get kind of just a blank square. So like it showed that you had all these to choose from, but not all of them actually transferred over when you pasted them. But I have not had that issue with Emoji Keyboard. That would be what I'd recommend.
I agree. That is the one that I am using. So we're simpatico with that one. So yeah, so we recommend using that extension while you're here in the Meet. So you cannot pre-populate your Meet polls. So just keep that in mind. Other than like how in Zoom, you can pre-populate all of your polls within Zoom, and you can reuse the ones in the recurring meeting. Anytime you leave your meeting, your polls disappear. So keep that in mind if you go to a lot of work when you make your polls, that they only stay in the current time that you're in the meeting. Okay, so once I have added this, okay, I click on save, and then I am going to launch. Okay, so I clicked on launch. Right now, I don't have it where everybody can see the results. So if you want to go ahead and vote, okay, so you can vote on if you love, like, or you can live without them. And some of you might not have tried it yet, but there you go. So as we look at this for instruction, okay, one of the things that you do need to definitely keep in mind, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll so we can keep on moving, is that your students will see this little notification in green. Now, I did hear from a teacher that one of the things that they were doing to check on attendance and to make sure that students were engaged, especially those that don't have their video for the teacher to see, they were distributing polls throughout the time. They never told them when. It was just that they were expected to see that green dot, and that was her expectation and norms for them. And so then that way she knew who was there and who was engaged moving forward.
So can I just say one thing?
Sure.
If you might want to, the first time especially that you do a poll, I'm just thinking, Tannis, as experiencing that as a student, it would be so easy to miss that poll that you just launched.
It would.
It would be really easy if there was not a verbal, reminder that this poll has been launched. So that might be something you definitely would want to practice and really show them how to keep polls open so that they can see when one's launched, because I almost missed it.
Yes, absolutely. So I appreciate that, Megan. So we definitely want to walk our students through all of these aspects, right? All of these tools before we have certain expectations. So most definitely you could miss it. And so that's why I think those first couple of times that you use any of these tools with them, that you definitely engage in the visuals, you describe them as you're going through these tools. I think that's extremely important and helpful. Okay, so some instructional strategies. Of course, we love a pulse check on the lesson at hand. And that's an easy one that you could definitely go in and you could create that quick poll, okay, using emojis. You could use some faces if you wanted to, but you could just get a quick check on your students and how they're doing on the lesson. That way, you know whether or not you need to be reflective and be flexible and change things around for them. And this nonverbal way of interacting allows those students to not have to turn their mics on. It allows them to just have that voice there. Quick formatives, because there, again, is a polls history that comes over to you, you could do a quick formative. The only thing is that you do not know who answers that data. So it's not something that you could do as like a quick quiz, because you wouldn't know who the student was right away and moving forward for that. So just keep that in mind. I think it's mostly for you to have a gauge on if they are grasping that material at hand. And then last, the data collection. If there's something that you need to do as far as an IEP or a 504 to collect any kind of data, this might be able to support one of those aspects, and it's good to talk it through with a coach or a PLC member to see how you could do that for moving forward. And like we said, the emojis are just fun to complement the text or to replace the text wholeheartedly. And then you don't have to show everybody the results. So on those, if I was doing a how are you feeling today, I would definitely have the results turned off just to make sure students feel comfortable and confident in providing that personal information. Okay, and then here's some fun ones. So in Team Polaris, I have tried this out with a colleague. We have played Two Truths and a Lie. We've done This or That, My Face When. It's a popular one from Snapchat that the kids really love. We've done some bell ringer fun, Classmate of the Week. They have to guess on the polls who you're talking about.
That's
so
cool.
The kids, they shared some slides with us. We put some icons over their faces and over their some of identifying aspects, and then they had to guess who the student was. So we've done that with polls, and we've also done it with the chat. So that's a lot of fun for kids. And then also I've seen classroom trivia be a popular one here as well, using the polls feature. All right. Okay, so one of the newer ones is raise hand. Very basic, y'all. Okay, so as we go down and we look at the bottom toolbar, there is a raise hand option. For you as the instructor, okay, you hear a notification. So you might have heard a notification as I raise my hand. I'm not sure as a participant if you hear it, but maybe it's just me as the host. So I just heard a notification when I raised my own hand. Kind of funny. If I put it down, it will disappear. But where you see this is if, Megan, could you go ahead and raise your hand for us?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so I get a notification on my screen that says Megan Cannon raised her hand. I still see the little icon in her tile, and then I can also see it if I have too many students on the screen all at once. I can click on the participants button up in the top toolbar, and I will see that Megan has her hand raised.
And Tanis, I can see that I have my hand raised too. I have that same little circle visible to me.
Excellent. So if I click on the participants, I see how many raised hands there are. Megan, do you see as a participant raised hands, or do you just see people in the call?
Well, does anybody else have their hand raised right now? Because I just see...
Oh, there's Jackie.
Oh, yep, I can see that. I got a little notification and I can see raised hands as well. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. And then from the teacher's perspective, right above the raise hands for the whole list of students, you can lower all of them at once. So think about being in the classroom. All the kids raise their hands all at once, right? Especially in the elementary. Maybe not so much the high school. maybe it's just like a little wave, or middle school, 8th grade. I don't know.
Yeah, not so much.
But you would have the ability to lower them all at once. So then that way you wouldn't have to have the students do it themselves, because sometimes they forget, right? They get so excited to answer something for moving forward. So that is a very simple tool. That's a great way for students not to have to unmic to be called on, that you can actually just have them raise their hands just like they did in the classroom. All right.
That was an anticipated update, wasn't it? People were waiting for that one in Google Meet.
Really excited. Yeah. All right. And then now this is a feature that you have to turn on as a participant yourself. So you do not turn these on for your students. I believe that you turn them on for yourself. So as I'm talking, if I wanted to turn on the closed captions, say I am sharing my screen and I wanted that to happen. Okay, so I would go on and I would click on that closed caption down in the very bottom portion of my toolbar, and it would start saying the words that were being spoken. I don't know if you're seeing my words being spoken, but
I turned it on, Tanis, and I have to say it's really accurate.
It's pretty accurate. The only thing I noticed yesterday was when I said Google Meet, it was spelling it MEAT, so that was kind of.
And it did, when I said Tanis, it did put tennis.
Of course.
It could be me, though. It could be me.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So those closed captions are really helpful, because I know over in Zoom, you actually have to have a scribe that you assign that takes those. And so for our students that need that extra, if they have a hearing impairment or they just need guided notes for them to watch what you are saying. And here's the other thing, guys, we're masked up. And so sometimes you can't read lips. And so that's why this is a really nice feature that they just came out with that really enhances the experience for our students if they cannot see what we are saying with our lips, because we have the mask. So I encourage you to use that for your students. I even think, you know, if you were in a concurrent learning situation like our high school folks are, that they could turn this on, and that kind of would help also in the classroom as well. All righty. So that is it for our Google Meet engagement tools. If you need further assistance or you have more questions, you can always reach out to our instructional tech specialist email. Just start typing instructional tech into your emails here in the district, and it will email all of us that are part of that group. And by golly, there's going to be at least 1 or 5 of us that answer you. That is for sure. So we're going to stop recording now so we can answer any questions, and we'll keep on going for a couple more minutes.
Can I ask one